We are counting down the top 10 everyday objects that defined life inside a Canadian home in the 1950s. From quiet rituals of thrift and family pride to the inventions that promised a brighter, easier future, each item reveals how post-war Canada shaped its identity, values, and daily routines. Some are familiar icons, and others may surprise you with their role in building community and comfort across the country. Which symbol of Canadian home life will take the top spot? Let us begin our countdown with number 10. Clear plastic slipcovers became a staple of Canadian living rooms by the late 1950s, crinkling under guests and preserving the bright upholstery beneath. In 1956, Joseph LeBlanc opened a Montreal factory dedicated to mass-producing these covers, answering a national appetite for practical, easy-to-clean furnishings. Within 4 years, department stores from Halifax to Vancouver carried LeBlanc's slipcovers, and an estimated 3 out of 5 middle-class homes in urban Canada had at least one. The slipcover was more than a shield against spills. It was a badge of respectability, a way to show care for hard-earned possessions. Yet not everyone welcomed the plastic look. La Presse ran columns debating whether these covers made homes feel modern or merely cold. Chatelain advised readers to soften the effect with hand-crocheted doilies, heirlooms that connected the new era with older traditions. For many, the contrast between plastic and lace captured the spirit of the time: thrift and pride, a longing for both progress and comfort, all on display in the heart of the Canadian home. Before dawn, the quiet of Canadian neighborhoods was often broken by the clink of glass bottles against metal. Milk delivery was more than a service. It was a daily ritual that connected farms, drivers, and families across the country. Each morning, a milkman would collect empty bottles from a porch box and replace them with fresh, cold milk, trusting that every household would return what was owed. In cities like Toronto, this routine played out on nearly every street, with an estimated 1 million bottles circulating in the city alone during the early 1950s. The porch box itself, sometimes lined with aluminum or wood to keep bottles from freezing, stood as a symbol of trust and community rhythm, children racing to bring in the milk before it could freeze or disappear. That trust was put to the test in July 1954, when Toronto's milk drivers walked off the job for nearly a week. The city scrambled. Grocery shelves emptied overnight, parents queued at corner stores, and neighbors shared what little they had. For many, it was the first time the absence of that morning delivery felt like a genuine crisis. When the strike ended, the familiar sound of bottles on the doorstep returned, restoring a small but essential comfort to daily life. Even as supermarkets and new packaging began to change the system, the memory of those early morning deliveries, glass bottles, porch boxes, and all, remained woven into the story of the Canadian home. The kitchen table in a 1950s Canadian home was a stage for daily life, and nothing captured the era's style quite like a formica-topped table with chrome legs, surrounded by matching vinyl chairs. Eaton's catalog called these sets bright spots in the modern kitchen, promising both durability and a splash of color. Laminate surfaces shrugged off spills, while aluminum trim gleamed under the morning light. Breakfast was a sensory event: the pop of a chrome toaster, the hiss and bubble of a percolator coffee pot, the clatter of cereal bowls and spoons. Advertisements in Chatelain painted the kitchen as a woman's domain of cheerful efficiency, where modern appliances freed up precious time. The Formica ensemble was more than furniture. It was a symbol of optimism, a place where families gathered to share toast and stories before scattering to work and school. Even in modest bungalows, this kitchen set stood as proof that modern design and convenience had arrived, shaping the everyday rituals at the heart of Canadian home life. After breakfast, the house would fill with music, not just from the radio in the kitchen, but from the spinning of vinyl records in the living room, or, for the first time, in teenagers' bedrooms. The arrival of the record player in Canadian homes during the 1950s transformed listening from a shared family ritual to something more personal. By the late 1950s, sales of 45 RPM singles and 33 1/3 RPM LPS soared, with Canadian retailers reporting record sales doubling between 1956 and 1959. The smaller, portable record players became a prized possession, especially among teenagers eager to claim a space of their own. Paul Anka, a teenager from Ottawa, topped the charts with hits like Diana, and his records spun on countless bedroom turntables across the country. Muriel, a mother from Toronto, remembered that they played Nat King Cole on Saturdays. And her daughter spun Paul Anka records in her bedroom with the door closed. The gentle click of the needle, the static before the music began, and the thump of footsteps above. These were the sounds of a generational change. The record player did not just bring music home, it gave each family member a private soundtrack, hinting at a new kind of independence that would shape Canadian youth culture for decades. Laundry day in a 1950s Canadian home demanded time, muscle, and constant attention. Most households relied on a wringer washer, a deep tub filled with hot water and soap, agitated by a churning paddle. After washing, each piece had to be fed carefully through two heavy rollers, the mangle wringer, squeezing out water but always threatening to catch a sleeve or finger. For many women, this was the heart of their weekly routine, stretching over hours and filling the house with the scent of soap and steam. Eaton's catalog promised relief in 1957 with a line that read, "End wash day worries. Make time for your family with a Beatty automatic." Ads like this, found in Chatelaine, sold the dream that technology could free women from endless chores. But the reality lagged behind the promise. Automatic washers, with their spinning cycles and push-button ease, only became common in the late decade, and mostly in urban homes. Beatty Brothers in Fergus, Ontario, the country's largest washer manufacturer, fell silent in 1953 when workers walked out, demanding safer conditions and better pay. For months, new machines were scarce, and prices jumped. The strike rippled through catalogs and showrooms, making even the old wringer washers harder to find. Helen from Winnipeg remembered that she cranked the wringer every Monday, until they finally got an automatic in 1958. Her hands ached, but it was the only way. The washing machine was more than a tool. It was a measure of progress, a symbol of modern womanhood, and for a brief time a reminder of how fragile that progress could be. Icebox was still king in many kitchens in the 1950s. Many Canadian homes relied on the heavy thud of an icebox lid and the delivery of ice blocks to keep food cool. The ritual of swapping melting ice for a fresh slab was as routine as boiling the kettle, especially in rural towns where electrification lagged behind city grids. By the middle of the decade, the quiet hum of an electric refrigerator began to signal a new kind of modern life. Statistics Canada reported that while only 79% of Canadian homes had electricity in 1951, that figure soared to 97% by 1956, a leap that made electric fridges possible for nearly everyone, at least in urban centers. Refrigerator choices from Canadian brands like Moffat, Gurney, and McClary filled Eaton's and Simpson's catalogs with promises of units made for Canadian climates, bright white enamel, chrome handles, and freezer compartments just big enough for a Sunday roast. In Toronto, a family might spend nearly 10% of their annual income to bring home a new refrigerator, a purchase that instantly set the kitchen apart. Catalogs listed prices from $240 to $400, and owning one became a quiet badge of progress and hygiene. The old icebox lingered in some farmhouses and northern communities, but the electric fridge quickly became the standard for those connected to the grid. The arrival of the refrigerator changed daily routines. Leftovers lasted longer. Milk stayed cold through the hottest July, and mothers no longer rushed to use up perishables. The The gentle motor hum, the snap of the door seal, and the gleam of chrome all spoke to a broader transformation. Canada's embrace of modern convenience was made possible by a surge of wires and power lines stretching from city blocks to prairie fields. Winter in Canada demanded more than just extra blankets. For most families in the 1950s, the heartbeat of the home pulsed through a coal or oil furnace tucked away in the basement. In small towns and rural stretches, coal trucks rumbled down snowy streets delivering black fuel in bulk. Coal was shoveled through chutes or cellar windows, filling bins that needed constant tending. The work left hands sooty, but the reward was instant. Heat rising through metal floor grates, spreading warmth into every corner. Children would rush to those grates in the morning, toes tingling on cold linoleum, hands stretched over the rising air. The sound of the furnace firing up, the whoosh and rattle of metal, became as familiar as any family voice. Urban households, especially in newly built suburbs, began to trade coal for oil by the mid-1950s. Oil was delivered by truck and pumped into indoor tanks. Less mess, fewer chores, and a promise of cleaner heat. Advertisements boasted about thermostats that let you set and forget, a luxury compared to the constant shoveling of coal. Yet in many prairie towns and older neighborhoods, coal deliveries remained a winter ritual well into the decade, the pace of change shaped by local utility networks and household budgets. The floor grate was more than a vent, it was a gathering place. On the coldest days, families huddled around it, reading the paper, drying mittens, or just soaking up the warmth. Oral histories from Saskatchewan and Manitoba recall these moments as the true center of the home, where stories were shared and the outside cold was kept at bay. The memory of those grates and the work behind their warmth lingers in the stories of Canadians who grew up in houses built for survival, as much as comfort. After 1953, a new kind of portrait began appearing on Canadian mantels and hallway walls. The face was instantly recognizable. Queen Elizabeth II, barely crowned, gazed from framed prints, commemorative plates, and souvenir mugs. Department stores from Victoria to St. John's filled their shelves with coronation memorabilia, and sales records from Eaton's show that thousands of Canadians brought home at least one royal keepsake that year. Some families displayed a formal photograph of the Queen in the living room, others set a gilded plate on the china cabinet, or poured afternoon tea into cups bearing her image. For many, these objects were more than decoration. They were a statement of connection to a monarchy that had shaped Canada's laws, traditions, and sense of belonging for generations. The Library and Archives Canada holds entire collections of coronation souvenirs, from mass-produced dishes to hand-tinted prints. These artifacts tell a story of pride and continuity, especially in Anglo-Canadian households, where the Queen's portrait often hung beside family photos or wedding certificates. June from Victoria remembers her mother polishing the royal plate for special occasions. It felt proper and proud. The Queen was part of our family in a way, yet the presence of royal memorabilia was not universal. In many immigrant homes, the Queen's portrait was replaced by icons or family relics brought from overseas. Indigenous households too often had different symbols of heritage and community, shaped by their own histories with the crown. The reach of coronation souvenirs was strongest in neighborhoods where British ties ran deep, but less common in the growing mosaic of post-war Canada. These royal keepsakes carried a quiet warmth, a reminder of old allegiances, and the comfort of tradition, even as new technologies and identities began to shape the Canadian home. The gentle glow of a Queen's portrait on the wall offered a sense of stability, bridging the gap between past and present in a country learning to define itself anew. A rotary dial telephone was more than a household gadget in 1950s Canada. It was the lifeline that connected families to neighbors, emergencies, and the wider world. The familiar click and whir of the dial echoed through kitchens and hallways, a sound as much a part of daily life as the rattle of milk bottles or the hum of a refrigerator. Most sets hung on the wall or sat on a hallway table, their cords stretched by children eager to call a friend or mothers waiting for news from relatives across town. But for many, especially in rural areas, the telephone was shared, a party line linking several households to a single number. Etiquette ruled these connections. You listened for your unique ring pattern, kept conversations brief, and always checked if the line was free before picking up. Privacy was never guaranteed. Eavesdropping was an open secret, and disputes over line hogging sometimes spilled into real-life quarrels. CBC Radio collected stories of neighbors feuding over gossip or missing urgent calls, and pamphlets from local phone companies urged politeness and restraint. In 1955, a Saskatchewan farmer tried to place an emergency call, only to find the line tied up with local chatter. His delay became a cautionary tale, broadcast on CBC as a lesson in rural responsibility and the hidden risks of shared technology. Yet for all its flaws, the party line was a social glue. Births, deaths, and barn dances traveled the wires. And in an era before affordable long distance, the telephone's reach was as wide as the community itself. Every ring, every click of the dial was a reminder of how connection depended not just on wires and switches, but on the everyday trust and patience of neighbors. Evenings in the 1950s in Canada often began with a soft glow flickering from a polished wooden cabinet, the hum of anticipation building as families gathered in front of their tube television set. The arrival of television was more than a technological upgrade. It was a new ritual that transformed the living room into the heart of the home. In September 1952, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, CBC, launched its first television broadcast, and with it, a new chapter in national life. The promise of coast-to-coast programming faced real obstacles. Signal relays required manual switching, and the first night was filled with technical hiccups, but nothing could dampen the excitement. On those early evenings, children adjusted the rabbit ear antennas, twisting and tilting them in search of a clearer picture. The reward was often a snowy screen that suddenly sharpened, just in time for the opening theme of Hockey Night in Canada. A sound that echoed from St. John's to Vancouver. CBC's broadcasts became a uniting force, bringing together families who, hours earlier, might have been separated by language, region, or routine. In Montreal, oral histories recall entire blocks gathering in the only house with a set, neighbors crowding the sofa or sitting cross-legged on the floor, everyone holding their breath as the puck dropped. Television ownership soared as prices dropped and electrification spread. By 1956, nearly every urban Canadian home had a set, and even in rural towns, families pooled savings or shared access, eager to join the national conversation. The wooden cabinets with their glowing dials and rounded screens were as much furniture as appliance, a symbol of arrival, prosperity, and belonging. The tube television did more than entertain. It brought the North's winter storms and the prairie's wheat harvests into the same living rooms, making distant places suddenly familiar. CBC's coast-to-coast signal stitched together a country that had always been defined by its distances, and for the first time Canadians could witness the same moments, laugh at the same variety shows, and cheer for the same teams in real time. The familiar static, the click of the dial, and the glow of the screen became the soundtrack of a new identity, one built not just on geography or tradition, but on the shared experience of watching together as the world arrived in their own living rooms. Across all these household staples, one pattern stands out. Canadian homes in the 1950s fused global trends with local meaning. Whether through portraits of the Queen or the clatter of a party line, daily life balanced tradition and modernity, always shaped by climate, community, and quiet ambition. These objects were not just conveniences, they were building blocks of identity. That legacy still echoes in what Canadians call home today.